neighbors, but we have closed borders with two of them. So basically, we have two borders open. One is Georgia, the other one is Iran. And of course, Iran is having a lot of problems with the United States, and we know about the sanctions against Iran. So we cannot use all our potential, and I'm talking about trade potential and all the other things, to develop our relations and economic partnership with Iran. Unfortunately, we're not able to do so. But Iran is trying to play a very, very constructive role. He is trying to. Actually, for Iran, it's very important to have a mutual border with Armenia, because this is one of those borders which is open for Iran. And of course, there is a pressure coming from the United States not to cooperate with Iran for all the neighbors, etc. But we're fortunate enough to have open border, and we are fortunate enough to have very good relations with Iran. And I think Iran is a very good partner, very good neighbor, and a very good friend for the Armenian people and for the Republic of Armenia.
We will definitely spend some more time on that. But before strategy for today, a few more words on Azerbaijan. Then we look at the conflict today, and then we take an international perspective. But another speaker, what I pointed out to him, and I would like you to reflect on this as well. Mr. Aliyev and Mr. Nikol Pashinyan both have the opportunity to ensure prosperity of their country, peace, only if they step down. Mr. Nikol Pashinyan would, and he would be safe. Nothing would happen to him. But if Aliyev would do so, he would need to fear for his life. Do you think it's correct? It describes the situation?
Well, it was correct and it was not correct. So there are a lot of differences between these two leaders. Nikol Pashinyan came to power with the use of one thing, and that one thing was democracy. But Aliyev came to power. He didn't come, actually. He received it from his father. And all the elections that they are doing in Azerbaijan, usually there's just one candidate and he's getting all the votes. So there is no democracy in Azerbaijan, as I already told you. So there is a big gap, and there are big difference between Azerbaijani leader and Armenian leader. Of course, I can say a lot of things that I disagree with our government, or I can criticize our government, and it's good. Azerbaijani people and Azerbaijani experts, Azerbaijani community cannot criticize their government. So this is one of the main differences that we have now. And why should Pashinyan resign? I mean, if we're taking
no, not resign. That was purely hypothetical. Just saying that the Armenian ecosystem enables him to say, okay, I'll do a decision which will fall on my back, for which I'll have to resign, but I will be fine. Nothing will happen to me. If in any world, Aliyev would do the same, because maybe an odd change of mind, or who knows what, he couldn't do that.
Exactly. I think you're right.
And I think that really nicely illustrates the complexity of the situation.
Exactly, exactly.
And so you've been involved in, let's say, the government in Armenia for around about 17 years, if I remember correctly. So then can you tell us a little bit about how did negotiations proceed, like throughout your time advising, throughout the time that you were active?
From Armenian side, it was always the president who were representing the country in negotiations. First, it was the Armenian president Levon Ter-Petrosyan for 8 years, then 10 years for the second president Robert Kocharyan, and then it was Suren Sargsyan, the third president of Armenia, who were representing Armenia during the negotiations. From Azerbaijani side, it was just Ilham Aliyev and his father Heydar Aliyev before him. So basically, these are the main players in this negotiation process. I mean, they know everything about the negotiation process. They know everything about a history, etc. So Nikol Pashinyan is someone who came to power just 2.5 years ago, and he actually came to power as a prime minister, not as a president, because before that we changed our constitution and Armenia became a parliamentary country. So it's not a presidential country, and the head of the state is a president, but actually the main power belongs to the prime minister of Armenia, to the government of Armenia. So negotiator is now Nikol Pashinyan as a prime minister. He represents the country during these negotiations with Azerbaijani counterpart. His counterpart is actually the president of Azerbaijan. So basically, within the last 10, 20 years, a lot of meetings took place, a lot of meetings between Robert Kocharyan, Tayyip Petrosyan, and Suren Sargsyan, and these all negotiations were about the territories, not the territories of Nagorno-Karabakh, but all the territories around Nagorno-Karabakh. Discussions were about the opening of borders, infrastructure, cooperation. A lot of things we're discussing, but there was one thing that nobody could ever get mutual understanding was the status of Nagorno-Karabakh, because everything could be solved, everything could be agreed, but the status of Nagorno-Karabakh couldn't be agreed, because Armenia was saying, and Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh were saying that Nagorno-Karabakh cannot be a part of Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan is saying that we can give any status for Nagorno-Karabakh, but it cannot be outside of the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. So there is a big gap, big conflict between these two concepts, and that is why basically we're not coming to a solution.
Okay, so how would you actually describe the complexity that it was not two negotiating parties, but always three: Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, and Azerbaijan?
It used to be a time. It used to be a time when Nagorno-Karabakh was represented as a separate party. I mean, it was a party during the talks, during the negotiations. But since 1998, I think Nagorno-Karabakh was out, and two parties, Armenia and Azerbaijan, started to talk. So Nagorno-Karabakh is not a party of this negotiation since 1998. But it's, of course, it's logical to have Nagorno-Karabakh Nagorno-Karabakh involved in this negotiation, because it's very important to ask the position of these people who live there. I mean, you cannot talk about the people without asking them what they want. So that is why it would be very logical to ask, okay, guys, so you live there for hundreds of years. Now we're discussing something about you. You need to be a part of it. You need to be involved in this, and you need to tell us about your position about whatever we discuss here. So Nagorno-Karabakh is not part of the negotiation process, but I think Nagorno-Karabakh should and shall be the part of it.
You bring up a brilliant point, and I think you can illustrate it a little bit more. The negotiation process started with three negotiation parties. Why did they transition to two? And what is the implication that I would say the reasonable Tayyip Petrosyan was succeeded by the battle-hardened Prime Minister of Nagorno-Karabakh, of Stepanakert, Mr. Robert Kocharyan?
Actually, what happened at that time? Robert Kocharyan was the president of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. And then, as a president of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, he was invited to Armenia as a prime minister. And when Tayyip Petrosyan resigned, automatically the prime minister became the acting president. According to the constitution, when the president, actually the constitution of 1995 that we used to have, when the president is resigning, the National Assembly speaker should become an acting president, but he also resigned. So prime minister became an acting president of the Republic of Armenia. And after the elections, he won the elections and he became the president of the Republic of Armenia. So at that time, he was actually representing both Armenia and Karabakh. He used to be like president of Karabakh for the last years, and then he's a president of Armenia. So he could represent, being a person from Karabakh, he could represent Nagorno-Karabakh too. So that is why Nagorno-Karabakh went out from this process. And Suren Sargsyan, the third president, he was also from Karabakh. So basically he was representing Karabakh and Armenia too. So if we cut it short, because it's a very long and very complicated story, why Nagorno-Karabakh left the negotiations table, we could just say that it was not a right decision in that regard. But at the same time, because Nagorno-Karabakh was represented by a president, former president of Nagorno-Karabakh and current president of Armenia. So basically, Robert Kocharyan had two positions, president of Karabakh and president of Armenia. So he was representing, no one better than him could represent at that moment Nagorno-Karabakh. So he was basically representing it.
So maybe then, if that is not too much, could you kindly, for all three presidents and the fourth prime minister, drop really 1 or 2 words how you describe their personality, their character, and the most important status quo of their negotiation achievement tactic. And so that we can understand what kind of a person would we need, what kind of an approach would we need that can be conducive to resolution.
It's really very hard for me to say anything personal about these 3 presidents and the prime minister. I was very young when Levon Ter-Petrosyan came to power. I didn't have a chance to work with his administration, but from what I know, he was a strong leader. He was the first president of Armenia, founding president of Armenia. He led the country during the first Karabakh War, which Armenia won, and he was the first person. He was the person who established all the state institutions during his time. So a lot of state institutions were established. Also, Robert Kocharyan was his prime minister before becoming a president, and Suren Sargsyan was his national security minister, defense minister, and police chief during his administration. So it was a team. It was Levon Ter-Petrosyan's political team, and these guys, Suren Sargsyan and Robert Kocharyan, actually used to be part of his political team, but they had a disagreement with him, different disagreements actually with him. So they decided to leave. They are very, very different persons in that regard. Ter-Petrosyan is a researcher. He's a professor. He's doing research. He's writing books. He likes history. He's doing a lot of good researches on very different topics, the Armenian history, world history, etc. So he's a big researcher. He's an academician, and he's very much involved in that. He used to work in Matena-Daran. Matena-Daran is the old manuscripts institution based in Yerevan, Armenia, where we have thousands of books, ancient books. So he used to work there. Robert Kocharyan was a person who was the president of Nagorno-Karabakh, and he was one of those persons who were fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh to protect his family. During heavy bombing of Stepanakert, chunk of Stepanakert in 1990s, his family was right there in Stepanakert in the basement. So they didn't leave Nagorno-Karabakh, and he was fighting for the independence of Nagorno-Karabakh, and he was one of the organizers of self-defense of Nagorno-Karabakh forces. He's a very strong personality. He still has involvement in Armenian political life, very strong personality, and he also was a good president in the regard of the economy, because during his presidency he had quite successful double-digit economic growth in Armenia. Talking about Suren Sargsyan, he was also from the Ter-Petrosyan team. Basically, he was national security minister. He was his defense minister, and he was also one of the organizers of self-defense of Nagorno-Karabakh. He was one of the authors of the liberation of Shushi operation, which is one of the most important achievements during the first Nagorno-Karabakh war. So he came to power in 2008, and he was very active in foreign policy. He was very much involved in international affairs. He did a good job on foreign policy. He was one of the guys who tried to actually establish relations with Turkey. He tried to do that. It failed because of Turkey, but he showed the world that Armenia is ready to talk to Turkey without any preconditions, but Turkey is not ready. So he was the guy who proved it to the world. So, and this is about Suren Sargsyan. And Nikol Pashinyan he's a former journalist. He used to be a journalist. He used to be an activist. He used to be quite involved in politics while a student in the university. And he was an opposition editor-in-chief of one of the Armenian opposition newspapers. So he was very much involved in politics. And in 2018, he was leading the national movement, and he was pressing on President Sargsyan to resign. And he was very successful, and his team was very successful. He pressed President Sargsyan to resign, and he was elected as a prime minister by the Armenian government, by the Armenian parliament. And then there was elections in the parliament, and his political party, his political bloc won the election. So he actually took the power after the demonstrations in the streets of Yerevan.